He's in.
All right, why don't we go ahead and get started then? I'd like to call the meeting of the Rules and Procedures Committee to order. It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday, December 22nd. Councilors Moore and George are present. Councilor Souza is not, but we still have a quorum, so we'll continue. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the meeting minutes. Our town clerk distributed the meeting minutes to the committee via email earlier. And I'd like to entertain a motion to approve them so we can get those posted on the website.
So moved.
Second, we'll take a roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so the motion passes 2-0. Okay, the next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone for public comment? Ed, I see your hand raised.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Let me lower my hand there.
Yeah, thanks for joining us again.
Sure. So, yeah, my one question tonight is relative to what the future holds for the recommendations. I know at this point, you've been focused on the ordinances that were submitted by Councilors George and Gallagher back in September. And then I guess my question is, what are your plans for handling all the other recommendations? Have you talked about that yet? Do you have a strategy? So that's really it. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ed. I'm happy to answer that. I think we're still working on the strategy. I have gone through and inventoried all the changes. And I think just in terms of complexity, the changes associated with actual clauses are probably the easiest. And then we can run those through the ordinance process like you've seen. We still have to figure out how we handle the grammar changes. We have had some discussions. I think we need to figure that one out too. Probably not in this meeting, but in one of the coming meetings. And then the last one are, I'd say, the structural changes, where we're actually just kind of moving things around, like the definitions, for example. That also requires some discussion, and we haven't had it yet. But thanks for asking the question, Ed. I'll put it on the agenda to carve out some time in an upcoming meeting to just sort of define that plan, so we're all have the chance to talk about it and are aligned on it. Okay. Anyone else for public comment? All right. So why don't we go ahead and dive in then? I do have my worksheets to share here. So as we work through these, I'll pull up the sheets partially as a reminder to some of the conversation that's happened, and also so we can see the different versions of language. So the first one we have is DFY 21-012. This is the admin change. I will pull it up on the screen. Let me see. Okay, I believe that I am sharing this now. So this is, as a reminder, this is the change to the admin code that goes along with the charter changes that we voted to pass in the last town council meeting. Let me skip to the background. So the original proposed ordinance actually only covered Section A, composition and authority. Section B actually has some language that is also impacted but hadn't been called out before. So I'm sharing Section B, and I'd like to talk through some changes to that as well, and then ultimately propose an amendment if the changes make sense. So maybe I can highlight them here and then sort of hop back up into the top. So the primary changes were in composition and authority. We wanted to switch it to 9 members, 1 from each of the 3 districts, and then 6 at large. And I think we've discussed that before, but happy to talk about that too. The second one was eligibility. The only change I made here is the existing language said a member of the town council who moves from one precinct to another shall cease to be a member. That worked when a precinct equaled a district. but now that you can move between precincts and stay in the same district, it doesn't work anymore. So I'm just proposing a language change there to turn that into a counselor who moves from one district to another, which I think still aligns with the original intent. Sean, any concerns with that or questions?
Nope. No, I mean, if it's in order, I'd make a motion to adopt the changes as proposed.
Perfect. I will second the motion. We could do a roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so it passes 2-0. All right, and I think that finally puts this one behind us. I'll close this one. We open up the next one, which is the type. Oh, actually, the next one is on the agenda is DFY 22-002. This is the correction of typographical and punctuation errors. This is the one we had some discussion on. But as I go through the list of changes, there are typographical and punctuation changes that were called out by the Charter Review Committee. And there's actually quite a bit more, I think, that just weren't caught in the volume of work that I've seen. And you'll see examples of some of those today. So I think the best way, what I'd like to propose as a way to handle this is we continue to postpone this one until we align on the actual substance changes or the substantive changes. And then we can do a cleanup sort of amendment to this where we can attach all of the actual language changes that are required. I think if we did it ahead of time, we're going to find ourselves just continuously editing that thing over and over again as we change the actual language in the charter.
Right. Right. No, and I agree with that, Eric. You know, as I've said before, obviously the intent is just to clean up grammar, punctuation, you know, things of that nature. But we also have to be very certain that, you know, making a change that we think is, and I use the word benign, doesn't lead to something down the road that, you know, has made a real material impact that we had no intent on doing.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely aligned with you on that one. So I think what maybe given that, I'll put that in the notes. We can kind of highlight that as our action plan for those changes, along with the risk sort of warning that you just gave. Does it make sense then to table this to a date certain, or not table it?
Yes. No, not table it. Yeah, we'll move it to a date. Yeah, to either the next scheduled meeting date certain.
Okay.
And I'll make that motion.
Okay, and I'll second that. We'll do roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. The motion passes 2-0. All right. The next one is ordinance DFY 22-003. Let me share this one. Got a worksheet on this one. Okay, this is the temporary absence. The original language didn't actually include the charter language, so we have to sort of draft that a little bit. So I have the current charter language, which essentially allows the town manager to select somebody to fill in for them and file that with the town clerk. And then there's a stipulation where the town council can jump in and change that if needed. The CRC explained to us last week that they would like to sort of change that so that the town manager can appoint anyone from the department heads. And then also the duration for a temporary absence was 30 calendar days. And then there was a clause that after 21 of those days have expired, the council could jump in and intervene with the selection if needed. And then you remember we had some discussion, Sean, where we actually wanted this to default to the assistant town manager because we thought that role should be qualified for this. And this would also be a bit of a driver for that. And then we said if for some reason she, the assistant town manager wasn't available, I think we'd use the example of like a wedding or maybe, it's sick or something, then the town manager could then appoint a department head. And then in the event that, he fails to do that, town manager fails to do that, the town council can jump in and appoint it. And then we also discussed about, we wanted to say that a member of the town council could not act in that role. That was based on some other places. So I tried to come up with some language on that. This is the language.
I think you did a great job, Eric, and I'm very comfortable with the proposed language that you have highlighted. Because it does outline the order of succession, lack of a better term, but it also gives the town manager the capability of, if they don't, for whatever reason, the assistant town manager can't do it, then they can move down to the department heads. And I like the addition. I don't know if Ed did it. If he did, thank you, about no one in the town council can act as the town manager. So if you're comfortable with your proposed, I would be willing to make a motion to approve as proposed.
Great.
Or recommend as proposed. I keep saying approve. We're not approving anything. We're recommending.
Yeah, perfect. I do like that, and I'll second that motion. And we could do a roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so the motion passes 2-0. All right, thank you. Let me stop this one. The next one on the agenda is FY 22-004, and this is the library trustees. Let me share this one as well. So this one, we had some questions on. I did reach out to the town attorney. We don't have answers to the questions. So I think this will end up being a longer discussion over a few meetings, but I did want to maybe highlight a few things just in the language itself that are questions right now that the town attorney is looking into. One is the town attorney is trying to get a better understanding of whether or not the rights afforded to the Board of Library Trustees in here conflict with rights that are already granted to other sort of members of the town government. And so he's doing some research there and is supposed to come back to us on that. That includes getting a better understanding of the financial rights that are stated here, where there's sort of budget and decision ownership. So I think that's just an open question that we're waiting to hear on. The other thing that was a little not confusing, but as I went through this, there were scenarios where the Board of Library Trustees was called the Library Board of Trustees, the trustees, sometimes uppercase, sometimes lowercase. So I tried to just standardize it all on Board of Library Trustees, which I think is like the official term. There was similar use of multiple terms for the library director. Sometimes it was director of library, other times it was director, sometimes it was library director. There is a clause in here that labels someone as a library director and gives them some rights. So I tried to go through and rename everything to library director just to be consistent. And then the same thing with Bridgewater Public Library versus library. Just because I thought there was some confusion between the library as the place versus the library as the trustees, and just to kind of avoid anything. So it's really just, these are just examples of those like punctuation changes.
Yeah, the one thing that you or I or we may want to do is reach out to Kim, and just from an HR perspective, what is the library director's official title, and just make sure it's consistent, through the charter. I don't know if it's director of the library or library director. I mean, we just want to stay consistent. It's not going to change that role whatsoever. That would be my only add, just, so that it just stays consistent. And I think it's library director, but I can't testify to that right now.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. I'll shoot her
Yeah.
after this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a huge substantive thing, but it's good to have that consistency.
Perfect. I did have another question on here. Ed, thank you for sending the email response. I don't know if you are available for a quick question. Perhaps you're not. Okay.
Yeah, no, I am.
Oh,
Sorry.
great. Yeah, sorry. And thank you, Ed. So a quick question on this. In this language on the library director, it talks about the library board of trustees writing a written recommendation within 180 days of the job being posted. And I just wanted to make sure I understood like the intended order of events here. I think what this clause says is when the new library director is posted, the board of trustees has 6 months to identify and recommend somebody. If they do not do that, then the town manager and the town council can move ahead and appoint somebody without a recommendation from the board.
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So I think that's it for now then on this one, Sean. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to move to our next meeting.
Perfect. I will second that. Roll call vote, Sean?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Motion passes 2-0. The next item on the agenda is FY 22-005. This is the town charter, town to city. So last time we discussed this, we had some concerns that this might have unintended implications. And so I took the action item of reaching out to the town attorney. It was an interesting response. He is sort of looking into this, and actually we did see some examples where state law treated a city manager different than a town manager. It cited those as two different sort of bodies. So there is, there's something there. But Jason said one of the challenges with something like this is to really understand the implications would take a lot of effort in like pouring through municipal code and everything we've done. So it's essentially he's saying it would just be more work than we're capable of doing to exhaust all of the possible options. I did ask him just, can you give me your top 10? And he's looking at that, but he did raise the risk of, even if he comes back and tells us we're good or tells us we're not, it's probably a small percentage of the overall law that he's able to look at.
Okay. I would probably make a recommendation. I don't want to keep this, I don't want to keep any of them too long, but keep this one too long. If Jason does come back with a lot of obstacles in the change that really makes an impact, I would probably in the future considering sending this back to the council with a recommendation not to move forward. And then, for the reasons that Jason outlines and things of that nature. And I understand the intent of why we're trying to, why this is being proposed, but if it's really going to have, if this is, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, like I always say, I'm only three and one of nine. I would hate for something like this to really delay something that we want to get, processed in front of the voters, things of that nature as quickly as possible. So I would make a motion to move this to our next scheduled meeting. But in the notes, I would say that barring Jason coming back saying, well, actually, there's no material impact, I would probably, the next meeting, vote to send this back to the council with a recommendation not to move forward.
Got it. I do see Ed has his hand up.
Yep.
Ed, did you have a thought on this one?
Yes, thanks, Eric. I do want to mention to you that there have been a number of towns that have done exactly this. So I understand Jason is doing his due diligence, but we may also want to just contact a couple of those other towns and find out. I'd be happy to help do that if you'd like. I know what towns have done it, when they did it, and just talk with the town manager or talk with whoever to see what the issues have been, if any.
And Ed, I appreciate that. And by all means, I will be upfront with this. Even with that, if the town attorney gives us a recommendation not to move forward, I'm going to go with the town attorney from a legal perspective. So I hear what you're saying, but there could be, like any town, something that's missed, that's moved forward. I mean, we've seen it in the current charter that we adopted from another town. There are a ton of things in there that I don't know if Franklin even is aware that probably needs to be fixed within their charter. Just it's always a cleanup thing. But I appreciate that. I just don't want you to take it as, if you do that and the town attorney comes back with a recommendation not to move forward, not to recommend this, I'm probably going to go with the town attorney. I just want to be upfront with it. That's all.
Thanks, Sean. And thanks, Ed. I think, to Sean's point, ultimately we'll be looking for Jason to provide it. But I would be interested, if you do have access to those resources and they've done some research and there might be something we could put on Jason's radar, I think it could be helpful there. So if you have something and maybe you could email it to me, I can make sure we connect with Jason. And I see, Fred, I see you have your hand up too. Did you have a comment on that?
Thank you, Eric. Just on this point, I thought I would reiterate a bit of concerns that I had previously expressed. I think that notwithstanding what may be the negative implications of the change that we may learn about through Attorney Rollins' efforts, I just really fail to see the benefit to the change as proposed. And I take nothing away from the task that the committee took on in putting this forward to us. But I just really think that there is just no tangible benefit to the town or its citizens from the change itself. I know that it's been expressed that it would help to, in some instance, alleviate some element of confusion. But what's been expressed in support of that is that it would also not require things like changes to signage and to vehicles and, town stationery and things like this. And I just think it's putting us in a position where we're only exacerbating the confusion. We're just adding to the confusion were we to do that. And for that reason, I just don't see the benefit. And I think that the potential negative implications of it do outweigh. And I know there's a fairly broad sense in the town that among many that it's not a desirable change, and the committee has addressed this. I understand that, and I understand their position, stating that, well, people just aren't informed about it, or people have kind of an uninformed reaction to the proposed use of the term city. And I understand that, but I just don't think that a case has been demonstrated yet to convince me that there's ultimately a benefit for anyone involved. But thank you.
Great. Thank you, Fred.
Yeah, and it's funny, Fred, just, to give a little feedback on that, I'm coming from a different direction. If this was, to your point, kind of a little bit of a learning curve on the change, but didn't have any potential substantive impact on the charter, I probably would recommend to put it in front of the voters. But like any other change, we're going to have to go out there and help educate people on what it is. For me personally, and this is me personally, it's just the other things that it could materially impact that I would definitely stay away from. So I think we're kind of saying the same thing in different veins. So.
Right. I agree. Thanks.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Thank you both. So Sean, I think you were going to make a motion to postpone this.
Yep. Motion to postpone until our next scheduled meeting.
I will second that and roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
I am also a yes. Motion passes 2-0. Pull this one down. The next item we have on the agenda is FY 22-006. This is the term of office.
Eric, I don't recall, did we have really any recommended changes other than what was originally proposed, moving from second Monday to next business day?
Oh, yeah. So actually, this one, I think we've already voted on this one and it went through.
And that's, yeah.
Yeah, it's
'Cause
the
I-
exact same language and we included it in the changes for the charter change. So,
Right, so I think we can table this one because it's already been approved at the council level to be submitted to the legislature.
perfect. And so if we table it, it doesn't impact the language we've already voted on, right? This is just this specific ordinance is now.
Yeah, I mean, we've already approved it, we have to approve one other thing, but yeah, well,
Yeah.
you know what, let me do this. Let me propose to table this to our next scheduled meeting. But with the hindsight that this probably doesn't need to come back because it's already been approved. I don't have access to our packet from last night readily available, but I'm 99% sure that this has already been done.
Yeah, me too. I know I saw it in there. So that makes sense though. We can postpone to the next meeting and then with the intention of tabling. So I would entertain a motion to postpone.
So moved.
All right, I'll second. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Motion passes 2-0. All right, the next one is DFY 22-007. This is election eligibility. This one, a couple of notes on. Let me show this. All right. So this is the language around how many terms, essentially term limits.
Yep.
And just as a reminder, and maybe introducing some new language, the current one says 12 consecutive years. I think we experienced some confusion over what that meant. And so the Change Review Committee proposed essentially 4 terms, or actually 4 elections or appointments for a district councilor, and then they could serve another 4 appointments and elections. And you could actually do both. So having served 4 terms as district didn't prevent you from running or serving 4 terms for at large. And then one of the things that we discussed last time, and I've heard through email as well, is there was some concern that when we talk about elections, they are specific events and they can happen without a long full term, right? So I think, especially if we're introducing the recall provision, somebody could go through a recall election, get elected, and now they've got 2 elections under their belt in the same term. And then in the case of that we're about to see, I've been in a year and I'm going to have to be elected again. And so I actually did a little bit of research on this and tried to figure out how other governments or state agencies, or elected roles at the state level, our state and others, how they handle this. And what I found is they had this language. This is the example from Arizona. There are others that are similar, where they essentially say a term lasting less than 24 months as a result of, some event, in our case, re-precincting or appointment, shall not be included in calculating the total number of terms served by a member of the town council. So they essentially say when there are these, unexpected, largely impacting events, or there's an appointment that is a partial term, less than 2 years, it's not applied towards your total. So it allows the person to continue to run. So that's something I would certainly be interested in introducing this as a provision. The example I think I had was from Arkansas.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Eric, if you could roll back down to the language, because where I was going to propose going was to be specific, and, Ed, if you wanted to pipe in on this for the, Charter Review Committee, would almost be that, you cannot serve more than 12 years, right? In either capacity, no more than 12 years. So to your point, when we redistrict, if you get elected for a year, that's only 1 year. It's not one term, right? Even though that would be your term. I get elected for 2 years. That wouldn't be my first term. It would be 2 years towards the 12. But if what I'm looking at now, I feel much more comfortable, because if this was just us changing it without having to do our reorganization, then I would keep the terms in there, because that would make sense around everyone's kind of on the same, we'll call it the same cycle, or whatever they get elected. So I would support item 4 being added to that, because that basically addresses what we're going to be doing next year. And that, like I said, it gives everyone kind of a fair playing field, that we still have term limits, but we have to go through a staggered election, so that we're back on a cycle of, not having everyone up at the same time, or the vast majority up at the same time.
Yeah.
So I would support adding that, and in the proposed language, I would support recommending that to the town council.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Fred, I know you had some thoughts on this one too. I don't know if you would like to jump in on this. You don't have to, but.
Well, thank you, Eric. I think that actually the proposed language that we're talking about now, I think is particularly well suited for our needs. I think that, certainly the ability of a counselor to complete their either district or at-large service, and then to be able to contemplate further service in the other category, I think is appropriate. And I certainly do think that your provision at item number 4, your proposal, is I think a very good way of handling the issue of a less than full term. So I have no particular concern about that. I would support that.
Great. All right. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
And before we move to a motion, Ed, I thought your hand was up. May not be. Is there anything you wanted to add on this?
It was, yeah. So the first point that I wanted to make, I think I made this last time, was that the title is actually not right. It's not election eligibility. It's really term limits. So I don't know if you can change that or not.
I will. Yeah, I actually have a note to correct that. I will correct that.
The other thing is, we got away from using years, mainly because of, what happened prior. So we felt that using the term elections was simpler and less complex. But I certainly think that if you just said 12 years instead of 12 consecutive years, 12 years achieves the same thing, and you wouldn't need number 4. So it's either or.
No, I think I hear you, and I don't want to come across as talking out of both sides of my mouth. If Eric hadn't found that language for number 4, then I would push for 12 years. And that's a great point. Take out the consecutive. We know where that led us.
Yes.
But keeping 4 in there, I do like, because I think not only addresses, for a historical perspective, what we did when this was adopted, if it gets approved, but also covers the bases in regards to keeping people in 4 full terms, at each side, with the intent of having, term limits approved for town councilors, depending on what role, either at large or district. So I would actually, and noting Ed's addition in regards to the titling, I would be in full support of the way you have it right now, Eric, with adding number 4.
Great. Okay, so I think, as you said, with the title change, I can make the title change and use this language. Should we entertain a motion to amend with the
Yes,
language in the title?
Yeah. as stated. Yep.
Great, I'll second that. Roll call vote, Sean?
Yes.
I am a yes. Motion passes 2-0.
I would make a motion to recommend to the town council. I don't see a need for this to come. Well, I don't see a need for this to come back to us. I would make a motion to recommend as amended.
Okay, I will second that. Roll call vote, Sean?
Yes.
I am a yes. That passes 2-0. Great. All right. Thank you for that one. We're almost there. The next one is on the agenda, FY 22008. This is the annual stipend.
Jump ahead. Oh, sorry. I skipped one.
Yep. So this one is an interesting one. I did a little bit of digging on this. Hold on, let me share my screen. If you remember, this is what was proposed. It was a $3,000 stipend. So when I looked around and tried to just kind of get a sense of what the language was elsewhere on this, I wasn't able to find any other town that actually wrote the stipend into the charter. What I did find were a few different things. So one is state law allows us as a town council to set our own salaries. And the only time when we don't is if we write in an exception to our charter to prevent it or to follow some other path. And so a lot of the other towns will either specifically say in their charter that they allow it, or they won't have anything, it looks like, and they'll just sort of do it under the state law. The towns that want more control over it will put in some language either to prevent it or to put some limits on it or to specify that expenses are also eligible, because that isn't at the state level, at least from what I heard and saw. So an example of this, maybe if I could just show you a quick example, is Braintree. The way that Braintree handled the stipend, I believe, is in their charter, they essentially said that the counselors are eligible for a salary. And then in their ordinance, they set the salary at $5,000. And there were others that set it lower, like $2,000. Some that had full salaries too. And so at least the mechanism that I saw in other towns was this combination of the charter says you can do it, and then the admin code actually states what it is. And then Sean, I know you had expressed, and I share the concern of, our preference would be to somehow get this in front of the voters when we wanted to do this and make sure that they were comfortable with the changes too. And I think we wanted to try to, if we could, maybe separate that from these larger charter votes, but still have a mechanism to put these changes in front of the voter. So where I landed and the language I created is essentially borrowing from the language that gives us permission to be paid, which is this first section. The members of the town council shall receive a salary that may be set by ordinance and approved by the qualified voters of the town of Bridgewater. I think this is a thing we can do, but I need some guidance from you guys. If we want to pass a law that also requires voter approval, I think this is a language that I was seeing that allows this to happen. And that was my intention here, is to say we could pass an ordinance, and that ordinance also has to be passed by the voters. And then the language says no ordinance setting or modifying the salary of town council shall be effective unless it receives 2/3 majority vote of the town council and also receives approval from the majority of the voters as a ballot measure at a regular town election. And then the taking of the effect after 1 year. So
I like how that is, Eric. I would run that by Jason, just to your point, from is this enforceable? Because for the intent that we want, which establishes a salary, but once that salary is established, we do not want the council to be solely, have the sole authority to change that amount without voter approval.
Yeah.
So
I can,
from a layman's perspective, it looks fine to me. But I would want him just to say, if this ever got challenged in court, by a future voter or counselor or whatever the case may be, I think we want to make sure that this is enforceable as it's construed, and that's the intent of establishing a salary. But once it's established and approved, any changes to it has to be initiated by the council, but then approved by the voters.
okay. I'll circle back with him. And if he does say yes, then I think we can pair this with an admin code change.
Yep.
There's an ordinance that we could run through. Okay, so I'll take that action item. The other thing that I think this helps with is we had talked about the concern of inflation. 3,000 now is good. 3,000 10 years from now, may not be the same thing. And so I think this allows us to do those incremental changes if we think they're needed.
Well, and that would be something that potentially could be in the admin code that doesn't need voter approval, but is specifically tied to something, I don't know, inflation, COLA, whatever the case may be. So again, the voters approve this, and I'm just going to, say it's $4,000. It cannot be changed by the town council without voter approval, but it can change on an annual basis following a specific index. So it's not arbitrary, but it's tied to something. And people may like it, they may not. It makes sense to me, because, I just don't want, I don't think anyone wants for like a $300 change or a $200 change because of inflation, that it has to go to the council, go in front of the voters. But if all of a sudden a future council says we want to go from 4,000 to 8,000, or they want to restructure it like Braintree, where councilors get X, the president gets Y, then yeah, we want to make sure that voters have a say in that as well.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
again, that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. So I think with this one, then maybe if we postpone it to the next meeting, I can take this language back to Jason, get his opinion, and see if there's some other language that could accomplish the same thing.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that would be good. Hopefully it's as is can be proposed. I would be 100% behind it. I'm not 100% behind stipends, but that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah. All right. So I guess I would entertain a motion to postpone to our next meeting.
So moved.
All right, I will second. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
I am also a yes. So the motion passes 2-0. All right. Let me exit out of this one. Almost there. Let's see. 9. Let me share this. All right, this is the recall provision. I have one suggested change in here. I was able to find essentially the same language, I think, in Hudson, and probably versions of it in other towns. So we don't currently have a recall provision, so this is all net new. The only suggested changes I had here were, again, highlighting city if we end up changing that. There was one sort of capitalizing district, but the most material one in the proposed ordinance and in the charter review committee, this was all sort of one big sentence. And I actually think the top over bottom structure of it is important. And I've seen it kind of called out like this on all the other charters that talk about it, where this is specifically describing how it must appear on a ballot, where this is over that. And then I removed the or. I don't think the or is actually going to be there on a ballot. So that was really my only change on this one. Otherwise, it seemed fine to me.
Yeah, the only other thing, maybe, I don't know if it's a big deal, is instead of, so the only position currently that can be recalled is a counselor. You may want to, instead of name of officer, just put name of counselor.
Okay.
I don't think any other, well, there's only 2 other elected positions. But this, hold on, let me take a step back.
So this
Let me take a step
probably,
back.
this was moved to,
Actually,
it is, yeah, I think it's supposed to.
you could have a recall, you could have a recall of the town clerk.
Right.
So maybe,
Library Board of Trustees.
Library Board of Trustees, yeah. Yeah, all right, well, I would probably keep it as officer. I don't know if we're gonna have to be more specific on that, but I agree with the addition to the ballot language.
Okay. Perfect. Then I think this is probably okay as is. We might just need to tidy up the city based on that outcome there.
So I would make a motion to approve as amended. Well, actually, no, I'll make a motion to approve the amendment, your change there. So let's do that first.
Okay.
Changes.
I will second that motion.
Yep.
We'll
And
do
then,
a roll call vote.
yep, roll call vote. Yep,
Sean,
yes.
I am a yes. So it passes 2-0.
And I'll make a motion to recommend as amended. I keep saying approved. I've got to stop saying that.
I think this one may also need a title tweak,
Okay.
if I'm remember that. Ed, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I thought maybe I'd get it in before you voted, but I think we talked about this last time. This is misplaced in terms of where in the charter. It should be in section 3 because it's not legislative, it's elected officials.
Yeah, you're right. That's what I was just mentioning with the title.
Yeah.
So I think
So it should just say Article 3, elected officials recall provision.
And Eric, we can take that as a friendly amendment.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I'll make a motion to approve the friendly amendment. I don't think we have to rescind the entire vote.
Okay. I'll second the motion.
Okay.
And roll call vote, Sean?
Yes.
I am a yes. So that passes 2-0. And then I will update that.
Okay.
All right. And then do we want to send this back to the council or keep it here?
No, this can go to the council. So don't forget too, Eric, I mean, one thing that will either you or we can collectively and talk to Matt is, it goes back to the council. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the next meeting, but does Matt want to get these approved as they come in? Or does he want all of our work to be presented in one meeting to go through everything?
Got it.
So what it does is, in essence, we don't want to keep things on our agenda that we've already, made a motion to recommend.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I'll connect with him too, and get a sense of that.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of us recommending this back to them, and then he can either, we can either take it or hold on them.
Yeah, I mean, it could be at the next agenda, or like I said, if the preference is for Matt to say, I want them all on one meeting, one agenda, then, he can hold on to that until we get everything done. That's my understanding. That I think that's his call.
I like that. So then I think with that, maybe I would accept a motion to recommend.
So moved.
I will second. Roll call vote, Sean?
Yes.
I am also a yes. Passes 2-0. All right, and now we have, I think, FY 2210-010. The town manager term of office. Let's see, pull this one up. Go. So this one, there were some changes recommended by the Charter Review Committee. We had some discussion last time, Sean, you may remember, about 3 years versus 5 years. Frank made a motion for 3. We did not second that. So we thought 5 provided more room for negotiation. But there were some other changes that I think we either supported or maybe we didn't have deep discussion on. So the language I have here on the right removes the maximum 3-year language, but it preserves the fact that we will fix the city manager's compensation, and then it includes the sentence, recommended sentence, since the city council bears ultimate responsibility, the city manager will serve at the will of the council and is bound by whatever policy action we take.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. And then I think everything else is unchanged from the recommendation. So with that, I think we could entertain a motion to amend as shown.
So moved.
A second, roll call vote, Sean?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Motion passes 2-0. And then I think we could do the same, or entertain a motion to recommend.
So moved.
Second, and roll call vote, Sean?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Motion passes 2-0. All right, so I think we're down to the last one, and this one I think we just need to figure out what to do with, Sean. This has language. This is the language for the town attorney. I don't have a sheet on this one, but if you remember, we discussed it assumes that the town attorney is in a contract position, and they aren't. They're an employee at will. And so we had said, rather than sort of pursue this specific ordinance, it might be better to table this ordinance, and then in one of the upcoming town council meetings, try to get a summary of just the role of the town attorney. And then we could propose something new if we thought, there's some other sort of version of this that we wanted to tackle.
Yeah, you may want to consider moving this to the next meeting. I'll be honest, I'm not going to support this to recommend.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'm happy to move it to the next meeting if we need to. I see. Ed, did you have a comment on this one?
I did. So there's 2 pieces to this. Obviously, one is the term, which you just discussed, but the other is who appoints the attorney. And we're recommending that it's the council that appoints the attorney as opposed to the town manager as it is today.
I thank you, Ed. Still, I will not support recommending this to the council.
Yeah. So Sean, maybe what we do is push this to the next meeting, and then we can dive into that second clause if needed.
Yeah, I mean, let's give Frank the opportunity, but I also don't think we need to keep this in committee any longer than the next meeting.
Yeah.
But I'll make the statement right now. I'm not going to support recommending this to the council. So.
Yeah. And I think, based on the original sort of reason behind this, where, I think we wanted to just have a closer relationship with the town attorney and kind of make sure, we're connected in the right way. There might be other ways we could get at that without a charter change. That might be worth exploring. Okay, so I think for this one, I'd entertain a motion to postpone to our next scheduled meeting.
So moved.
I'll second. Roll call vote, Sean?
Yes.
I am also a yes. The motion passes 2-0. That completes the legislation referred. Do we have any public comment?
Well, it's not on the agenda, so you can't ask for it. It was at the beginning of the agenda.
I think it's actually in both places. It's in the beginning and the.
Wait, did you throw me a curveball?
I may have. So surprise.
All right. Well, no, then it's on there. Any public comment?
Yeah. I don't see, so hearing none, I think we can move on to adjourning. Sean, should we pick a next meeting, or should we try to do that through email to pull Frank into it?
No, let's try to, at least for you and I, and then work with Frank.
Perfect.
So I'm,
Next week might be a little tough for me.
that it's going to be dicey for me as well. So probably the first week in January. I am good. So our first council meeting's the 4th of January. Okay, so we got to
Yeah.
stay away from that. Right now I could do Wednesday, the 5th, 7 o'clock.
Yeah, I can do that too. Let's plan on that one then.
Okay,
So the next meeting will be 1-5. All right. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone who attended. Thank you for the input. I appreciate it. And Ed, thank you for your continued support. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second, roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
I am also a yes. Motion passes 2-0. All right, I think that's it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great holiday.
Enjoy the
Appreciate it.
holiday.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.